So it had audio. David Janice tells the Supreme Court it didn't have audio.
Yes.
But yet there was some other agency got involved. What was that agency? I posted the
FCC.
The FCC, they had a little bit of heartburn over the type of camera that it was.
Yes.
It was one that could electronically spike and kill somebody.
Yes.
Well, I guess Mr. Janice is fortunate no one got killed. So what happened whenever the FCC writes this letter? What did they say in the letter?
The cameras had to be removed immediately and all locations had to be known.
And he did remove them immediately?
They were removed last week.
My goodness, so this was over several weeks, weren't they?
Yes. They were turned off.
Okay, they were turned off, but if I understand, you got reprimanded by the sheriff in a sort of a leave a message way. I took a picture of this thing because you had objected to those cameras being in the courtroom, because these cameras were in the courtroom, right?
Yes. There was 2 cameras. My objection was that anyone coming into the office, say someone was having difficulty with a family member, perhaps alcohol or drugs involved, and they wanted to know where they could get help. With an audio feed, there's no confidentiality and you don't know where it's going to. And with it being on the computer, you don't know who's hacking in to listen to whatever. And by the time that person leaves the office, there could be a law enforcement officer waiting on that family member for what they thought was a confidential conversation.
So there really was broadcast into the entire county, weren't they?
It could, yes.
And of course, they're using, according to the newspaper, they had convicts present at the Frank office, and there was some mention that I had heard that maybe this wire was going through to the Frank office. That would have made it possible for the day report people to listen in too, wouldn't it?
If they had access.
And of course, most of all, the deputies in Marlington could have heard it. Mm-hmm. And perhaps seen it as well.
They had access. I'm not sure who had access. I was never told. When anything was mentioned, I was told if I wasn't doing anything wrong, I shouldn't care that there were cameras there.
Well, really? Well, the issue wasn't what you were doing wrong. The issue was the folks coming in there had a right to confidentiality.
Yes.
They had a right to not have the sheriff listening to them. And who knows what other person might have been listening.
Well, with the office, the state police have used that office to interview children in abuse and neglect cases. The Family Refuge has used our office to meet clients who were having difficulties in a relationship to get them the help they needed. And that's not something needed to be seen by anyone else or heard. So that
maybe it scares you that somebody could have videotaped those, couldn't they? So maybe a year or 2 down the road, those interviews could be showing up somewhere. I would have thought that David Janice, being involved in the service for so long, would have had some appreciation for the lack of security in that type of situation. Just because he says he's not going to do anything doesn't seem right. Because how can he protect it? Okay, let's move on then. We've talked about the moving of the office and the cameras. Do you have some philosophy that you utilize with, say, alcoholics? Can you explain whenever you have a drunk driving scene or some type of drunken situation, what are the rules?
We cannot arraign someone for that. If someone is drinking, if they're just out in public as a public and talks, the code states that the first thing to be done is to give them to a competent adult. You can write them a ticket, release them to a competent adult. Take them home is the second thing, and then as a last result they could be arrested. But they cannot go before the magistrate for that because they are under the influence.
Well, are there people who are under the influence ending up in jail?
Many times.
And under what occasions would someone end up in jail?
just about any time, depending upon which agency arrests them.
Now, the sheriff's department is pretty well known in the county for making midnight raids. What's your attitude toward these midnight raids?
I think that's a last result when you have someone that you know is a violent offender. At that point, I mean, you want to catch someone by surprise, but normally they're unnecessary. I mean, you would use them if you're busting, say, a meth lab.
Right.
Or something to that effect, but in normal procedures, they're not necessary.
The current sheriff doesn't share that philosophy apparently, because he likes to wait till late at night and bring his people in to search your place and to make an arrest, regardless of whether you're dealing dope or what. That's been my experience.
It's been an experience of several, yes.
And it's kind of scary to think that he deliberately waits. Now, this is my personal opinion. He deliberately waits until late at night to come, because he's got a pretty good arrangement set up. And he comes to your house. He has people called the Sheriff's Auxiliary, and they get paid for transporting people over to Tigers Valley. This has been my experience, and I've observed him doing it. How do you feel about that?
I think a lot of it's been unnecessary.
And it's also unnecessarily expensive.
Yes.
Because these guys get paid $8, and gals get paid $8 an hour.
Well, it puts them at risk also. If they are transporting someone who can become violent or sick, then I don't know that they have the training to deal with that.
Well, they're unarmed. By law, they're unarmed. So
right.
Basically, when they're transporting people, it's kind of almost on the honor system, isn't it?
Yes.
They put them in shackles, leg irons, but beyond that,
that's it.
They're on their own. And it seemed to me like this idea of the sheriff's office is a pretty poor idea as well.
Well, we do have a holding cell in Marlington, and my thoughts have always been, if you're going to pay someone 4 hours, if it's after 10 or whatever, I've even offered to come in early, and have done that in the past when it was really bad. We had Roy Lambert, when Roy was working for the Sheriff's Department, spent the night at the old jail with some people, he and one of the other transport people, because the roads were so hazardous. And I commend them for that, because it was using their head instead of being on the road and putting people's lives at risk.
Mm-hmm.
So there's different things that could be done. But one of the things, and this is something I would like to address, there's been statements made by the sheriff, and I think actually this is something that someone else addressed with you, that I have called people and told them they had warrants. And I'd like to address that. My brother was a trooper for 25 years. He worked undercover, he worked with the Marshal Service, so he put his life on the line. Any time that someone knows law enforcement is coming to their home, that's putting an officer's life on the line. That's not something I would do. If it's something that I would even consider, I can issue a summons to appear for someone, and they're not even going out to be arrested, they bring themselves in. I've had people show up saying, my understanding is I have a warrant, I've checked and confirmed it, I've done the paperwork with them and called the officer to come and do the processing and everything. But as far as me calling someone or telling them there's a warrant for them, I have not done that.
Well, I appreciate that approach. I have to say that did not happen. That no one let me know. I had no inkling whatsoever that the night before I was to fly out to see my new grandson in Seattle, that David Janice would show up with 8 people. 2 or 3 sheriff's hawks, his paper server, and his lady corrections officer. And they arrested me that night, and they ruined my trip to Seattle. It's really hard to understand. Whenever they arrested me, they were going to put a waistband around me. I don't know much about these things, but they were going to do that. And David Walton made the claim. He said, "Well, Norman, we know you're not going to cause us any problems." So the deal was I was too fat to get the chains around me. So they didn't even do that. They just put me in the car with my handcuffs on. And the thing that gets me, I was a former county commissioner. I a school teacher and a preacher. And there was no need to bring 8 people to my house and search my house for 4 hours, all because David Fleming, I had accused him of not living in the right district. But they did. Took away all my computer equipment, except for my monitors and my keyboards. It hurts, Janet, when we have that kind of law in our county.
It does. And the only way, I think Jamie Walker said it best in his county commission meeting it's been about 3 or 4 meetings ago, and someone made a comment, and he says, if you don't like what's being done, the best thing is to step up and try to make changes. And that was the reason he ran for county commission when he did. And I think you can look at the number of candidates who are running at this time and see that evidently there is dissatisfaction in the county.
Tremendous dissatisfaction.
And hopefully we can get our county back on track, and it can be a decent place to live without people being afraid of law enforcement. I would like to be able to tell children again, when you get in trouble, look for a uniform.
Thank you, Janet.